Welcome to the May 13th Thrive on Plants virtual club meeting. Today we are so lucky to have Hannah Kaminsky. She is a 6-time cookbook author, all things sweet, bittersweet blog, and she is going to be here for a Baking 911. Basically, all of your questions about baking, substitutions, flops, like I tried to do this and it didn't come out, why, help me. She's going to be available to do this for us. So I am going to turn it over to Hannah and have her just introduce herself to tell us a little bit more about her, and then we're going to jump into the questions, which we already have several.
Excellent. So hi, and thank you for having me here today, or here, but there in your home. Full disclosure, my dog is here. He may be a pest, so please don't mind him like this. So I have been baking and cooking as long as I've been vegan, and that's, I guess, about 20 years now or so. I never baked or cooked before that, so when I make a recipe, I don't approach it necessarily from the perspective of having to replace dairy or eggs, but just they never factor in. A lot of experience has shown me the best way to do that if I was going to veganize recipes, so I can certainly help. And I definitely want to take your questions. My most recent cookbook that was released is Sweet Bean Treats. Got here. And you can find this on Amazon. You can download the digital copy instantly. They should be shipping shortly now, even if it's a non-essential, which I disagree with. Yeah, so I guess I'll just jump right into it because our first question was about cornbread. And I believe the issue was that they looked good on the outside, but were raw on the inside. So that to me sounds like an easy fix. I believe the oven was just too hot. So the outside cooked before the inside had time to finish baking. So I would just turn down the oven heat and cook it a little bit longer next time.
Do you have any suggestions about convection oven versus the regular bake settings on an oven?
Yeah, I should know more about this. I honestly don't see a huge difference between the two. I've definitely played around with it. I know that the oven in my parents' home does convection baking. My oven here does not. I really don't see a difference.
Okay. I know sometimes things can cook quicker on the top, with the oven, with the convection setting, because it's blowing that hot air. So sometimes, that may make things look like they're cooked, but then, like you said, inside, they're not.
What makes a bigger difference in baking, you mentioned cooking faster on top, that's just true universally. If you put food closer to the cooking element, if the cooking element is above, it'll cook faster. If it's below, it'll cook faster on the bottom. So usually when you're baking, you want more even, steady heat. So you want to put the rack in the middle, no matter what, unless the recipe tells you otherwise.
Excellent, excellent idea. And we had another question, and I'll monitor the chat. So if you guys want to ask your questions via chat, please type them in, and then I'll give them to Hannah so she doesn't have to look at those. But
appreciate it. This is also only my 3rd time using Zoom, full disclosure. I have no clue what I'm doing.
Oh no, you're doing awesome. This is perfect. So one of the questions was, how do you make a meringue with aquafaba?
Okay. Super simple and really fun. I love doing it. So for your best bet, you always start with the chickpea brine because it has the best ratio of starches and proteins. Brand does make a difference. I really hate calling out brands because they all work, but it's just varying degrees of how well they work. I actually really like Trader Joe's best for whatever reason. You can make better aquafaba by reducing it slightly on the stove. So cook it for just a few minutes on medium heat in a saucepan, evaporate about 1/4 of the liquid so it's more concentrated. You definitely want to do this in a stand mixer. Sorry, you need that heavy artillery. It'd take forever if you whipped it by hand. And it helps also if you mix a little bit of cream of tartar into the sugar itself. because that helps stabilize the foam.
Does it matter what type of sugar?
Not necessarily the type, but the grind. So you want a fine sugar if possible, but not confectioner sugar because that has added cornstarch. So if you just have regular granulated sugar or like evaporated cane juice, which can be a little bit more coarse, I would run it through the blender briefly to make it a little bit finer.
Oh, that's a great tip because I have seen a lot of people use confectioner sugar, you know, the powdered sugar.
Yeah, the starch really gums it up. And it's only a tiny amount of starch, but it's enough to throw off the ratios.
Okay, excellent. And you said you could do it with another type of bean, like a black bean or a kidney bean, but that
Absolutely.
the garbanzo or chickpea is also neutral in color. So that's nice.
Right. It makes a stronger foam, and it's the most clear and most bland, which is a good thing in this case.
Yeah. Have you ever made it from your own aquafaba that you soak beans and then cook them?
I have not, I must admit.
Okay. Because that's something to play around with too for people.
Absolutely.
Okay, next question is, what are some good substitutes for butter and sugar? So that's Phoebe. Phoebe, do you want to give us a little more detail as far as what you're trying to make with the butter and sugar? We'll see if okay, banana bread and cookies.
Okay. So butter, there's really great vegan butter on the market these days. I definitely recommend Miyoko's. It's my top pick. It's delicious just for eating, baking, cooking, 1-for-1 ratio with conventional butter. But if you're looking to avoid like a butter, if you want to use more of a liquid oil that can't necessarily be used for everything else, like cookies, if you're creaming the sugar into butter, you really can't use a liquid oil. But in something like a quick bread or a cake, like banana bread, you can absolutely use a neutral oil like rice bran, avocado, olive oil, some of my favorites. Canola, kind of mixed on the health benefits, but it's fine. It's a good neutral oil. What you want to do if you're substituting though is use about 3/4 of a cup to every cup of butter. Or if you're using like 3/4 of a cup of butter, 2/3 of a cup of oil, just because there's so much liquid.
Could you substitute something besides oil? Like if you wanted to go oil free?
I can't really recommend oil-free because the texture
Okay.
will suffer, but
Okay.
you can reduce the oil by substituting up to half of the volume liquid in like applesauce or pumpkin puree. And
Mhm.
just bear in mind that it will work, but it will be different. Good, but
Mhm.
different.
Yeah, I have a recipe on my website for a pumpkin banana bread, zucchini. I think it's pumpkin zucchini bread, not pumpkin banana bread. And I have a few in my cookbook that people can find too. But yeah, it is you're gonna get a different crumb, you know, with or without the oil. And then for sugar, do you have recommendations for your favorite sweeteners?
Sure. So if I'm using sugar, I do use granulated sugar frequently. You can find certified vegan brands. I don't have an issue with that. But you can also use coconut sugar. It's a great substitute for like that brown sugar flavor. Um, if you're talking about alternative sweeteners like stevia, monk fruit, um, it's really tough because the different brands vary so much for the different ratios you want to use. They add maltodextrin to increase the volume to make it more 1-to-1 with sugar, which I don't know if that's better or worse. It's just, starch, really. And it can be an issue for people with allergies because maltodextrin is based on corn. If that's an issue, you need to be aware of that. It also will not brown the same way that sugar browns. It won't look the same, taste the same. Yeah, it really also depends on the baked good. So I'd be happy to help you work out some alternative there. Sometimes you can use like liquid sweeteners, agave, maple syrup, but again, not in cookies, maybe in quick breads, maybe in cakes. It really depends.
Baking is definitely a science and art. It's
There's so
so
many
much.
factors that go into it.
Yeah, even humidity, you can't just, like with your cooking, you can just swap out things, but it's not so easy in baking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and if you have more questions about that, Phoebe, please add it into the chat.
And if
Adrian
anyone
has,
has like
go ahead.
specific recipes they want help with, you can follow up with me after and I'll like walk you through it.
Okay, wow, that is a huge offer. Thank you. Um,
My hotline is always open. Email me, hannah@mysweetvegan.com. I genuinely do love helping out, so just reach out.
Yay, that's so cool. Oh my gosh. Okay, so Adrian, she said, I'm craving pancakes and cookies. Where can I find good plant-based whole food recipes? So we're trying to do as much whole food, as
Mhm.
possible. So do you have any suggestions for good pancake or cookie recipes?
Sure. Pancakes are the easiest thing in the world. I can just create a recipe for you right now on the spot. I would
Okay.
say you can use oat flour because that's a really good one, gluten-free, certified, if that's something you should be concerned about. I would do 1 cup of oat flour to 1 cup of non-dairy milk, any type you like. 1 teaspoon of baking soda powder, half a teaspoon of baking soda, pinch of salt, tablespoon of maple syrup. Mix it all up, put it in the pan, flip it. You got
Serve
pancakes.
berries on top.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have a
Or
question for
bananas.
you. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say loads of topping options. Bananas, extra maple syrup, it's
Please.
blank canvas.
Definitely. Now, what can you explain for people the baking soda, baking powder? So you
Sure.
said both, and some recipes will have one, some will have both. That would be helpful, I think, for some students, especially if they haven't taken my cooking class.
Sure. So baking powder is actually a mixture of baking soda and cream of tartar. So they call it double acting because there are 2 stages for it to rise. It begins activating the chemical leaveners when it is in contact with water, and then rises a second time when it's in contact with heat. So that you get both of those stages, a delayed rise, and it helps with consistency. And the added baking soda just gives it an extra little boost. If you have all baking soda, in many cases, it will like either exhaust all of its bubbling action before it gets into the oven or hits the heat, or rise too much too quickly and then sort of collapse in the oven.
So I have a question based on that, actually. You know how sometimes you'll make up like pancake mix, and if you're trying to make more, and I say mix, but I don't mean like a store-bought, like you're doing a recipe, and
Mhm.
as you're waiting for the next batch to be put on the skillet, it gets thick, right? Because you can see the bubbles. And so I always typically keep adding some liquid to thin it out. Is
Mhm.
that a good idea? Or, I mean, obviously the pancakes will look a little different as they go along because I'm adding more liquid. Is there something you recommend? Is that too much baking soda or baking powder in that case?
No, it's not so much an issue of the leavener in that case, but it's just the liquid and the starches absorbing the liquid. So if you want better consistency, what I would recommend is mixing the batter in advance and then chilling it for maybe an hour so that it can fully hydrate, and then adjust the liquid from there and then begin cooking.
That's a great suggestion. Oh, that's excellent. Because I do that every single time, because I like to make a bunch of pancakes. And so I seem to just keep adding more and more liquid, but I do it on the spot. I typically don't do it ahead. So,
And that's fine. Just bear in mind, consistency
yeah.
varies.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Another question from Colleen. What is healthier for baking? Dutch processed cocoa powder with alkali is dark brown in color, or regular cocoa powder that is lighter in color?
For health value, they are the same. Dutch with alkali is just different pH. It's been processed to make it a darker color, and it reacts slightly differently with baking soda. So if you're making a red velvet cake, you want to use natural cocoa, not Dutched, because it won't rise the same. It won't have the same color, but they're the same nutritionally.
Okay, excellent. Another question. So Tracy is asking, can you explain how guar gum or arrowroot is used in cooking?
Okay, you would usually find those in gluten-free recipes most frequently. Guar gum, you only need a tiny amount. It's very similar to xanthan gum. They're both, I believe, corn-based. I know xanthan is. Guar is based on the carob bean, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's better if you have corn allergies. You only need, if any, maybe a half a teaspoon for every cup of gluten-free flour, maybe a quarter teaspoon. It just adds a little bit of extra binding power where the gluten would be in all-purpose wheat flour. The starch you can use independently to thicken puddings, custards, things like that. I often use that in like making an ice cream base.
Now, arrowroot versus cornstarch, versus tapioca starch, do you have any comments about those?
Yes, they thicken about equivalently, so you can interchange them in recipes, but the texture does vary. It's hard for me to explain this. It's going to sound funny. Cornstarch, it has more of a short bite. It's more a rounded thickener, whereas like arrowroot has more of a sticky bite. It can be a little bit more slimy. It's just a different mouthfeel. So a lot of times when I'm making a custard or an ice cream base, I'll combine different starches to get the right variation of textures.
Oh, okay, that's great. And then can you speak about, this is not a question yet, but it's in my mind, about agar-agar. So that's the seaweed, right, based thickener that sometimes you'll see.
Yeah, so I like using the powder. You can buy it powdered, flaked, or in like Asian markets, a big stick of it. The stick is impossible to use. Just gonna say that. The flakes take a lot of work to dissolve, and the powder is much more consistent, easy to work with. So I definitely prefer that. It can be used as a gelatin substitute, although again, with the textures, it has a short bite, whereas gelatin has more of a chewy bite. You can't use it one for one necessarily, like if you're making marshmallows or candies, but you can make it like just gels. If you wanted about 1 teaspoon for 1 cup of liquid makes a gel if you want to make vegan jello. So you could use any fruit juice you wanted and you've got just instant fruit jello.
Okay. What other recipes come to your mind for agar-agar? Is there anything else that besides jello?
It's a bit limited. I mean, I've done like silky tarts. Again, it's best used in concert with a starch for that creamier mouthfeel, and that helps it to just set a little bit firmer.
Okay. Would you use that in an ice cream base?
No, unfortunately, agar doesn't freeze well.
Okay, good to know. All right, excellent. Next question is, I heard somewhere that baking soda and baking powder can expire. Is that they're too old and then that could affect the outcome of the baked goods? Is that true?
Definitely. I just had to toss an old canister of baking soda. It was expired by about 5 years. I realized this isn't good. It loses its, chemical leavener properties, and it doesn't give you the same, activity. Like imagine yeast, which is a living thing. And if you kill half the yeast by heating it too much, like if you poured boiling water on top of it instead of just warm water, that kills the yeast. It's not going to be as active. You don't get as fluffy bread. It won't rise as nicely. And it will definitely impact your baked goods. So you want to write down when you get a new canister of baking soda, baking powder, the day that you open it, and toss it within a year.
That's good. You could even use a Sharpie and write right on the jar. right? Or
Yeah,
the
I like it. The baking soda, the Arm& Hammer brand, I guess, they actually leave a space for you specifically to write the date.
put the date. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Excellent. There was a question that made me think about that. I don't know. Okay, I'll go to the next question and we may come back to it.
Sure.
So Vic is asking, could he use agar agar in candy? He's thinking about like a chewy, like a peach ring, you know, kind of like I think he's thinking like gummy bear type. He said, think peach rings.
Sure, peach ring. Again, I would use some agar, but not all agar. I think you'd be much more successful with pectin in that case to get more of a chew to it. Whereas if you just use all agar, it's going to be more like, if you're familiar, the Jello jigglers, like the shapes, it's got that weird texture to it.
Okay, he'll use that, I am sure. Tracy, what is the best substitute for eggs? So Tracy, can you chat in what you're trying to make? Because I think it will vary because eggs have different properties depending on what you're making. So I'll
And
wait
there's
for
so
you.
many egg replacing possibilities.
Options. Yeah, there's a lot. Okay, baking cakes or cookies, she said.
Okay.
So eggs in baked cookies and cakes.
So my favorite, again, at the moment is aquafaba. It's everyone's favorite bean. It's just very neutral, very easy to use. I would use 3 tablespoons for every medium egg. Besides that, I really like ground flax seeds. So you make a flax egg with the goo. You make that with 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed and 3 tablespoons of water. Whisk that up, wait about 15 minutes, and it sort of gels. It's really great, very neutral but slightly nutty, so it's really good in savory baked goods, especially breads and things. And you can use that in pretty much anything.
Okay. The next question is coming from Ken, and it sounds like he's looking for resources here. He says, I am interested in creating and baking bread from scratch. Ken, can you actually chat whether you're talking about a yeast bread or a quick bread? He said, any recipes or resources you can recommend? What is your top 3? What are your top 3 go-to recipes? So we'll wait for him to let us know if he's talking yeast bread. Have you played around with sourdough?
Oh gosh, I should have known this was coming up. Everyone's on the sourdough train, and I'm sad to say I can't do sourdough. I've tried. Okay. I have killed 3 starters. I'm out. I can't help you with sourdough.
We may have someone in our group that's doing sourdough. I haven't played around with it. Yes. Okay. So let's see. Let's keep going and I'll come back. I don't know the difference between the both yeast or quick. Okay. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about the difference between yeast breads and quick breads and to give him some background.
So a quick bread is usually something that's more sweet, like a banana bread, pumpkin bread, and it's quick because you just mix up the batter like you would a cake or a muffin, plop it in the pan and bake. Yeast bread, you use yeast and it takes a bit more time for it to rise. You would have to shape it, give it a second rise, you know, simple. So
he is looking definitely yeast, he said. So he's looking to make more of a yeast bread.
Okay, well, just gotta give a little self-promotional shout out. I have hundreds of recipes on my blog. It's been going on for about 15 years now. I've got lots of breads, both quick and yeast, bittersweetblog.com. But my top resource for all things yeast bread, King Arthur flour. I mean, they know what they're doing. They've been doing it for hundreds of years. Hi. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. Excellent. That's great resources. And we need to visit your blog and get that out there. It's already out there in our group. Yes, for sure. What flour was that?
Leave me comments. A King Arthur flour.
King Arthur flour. Yes. Okay. Next question is, is for you about your cookbooks. Do your cookbooks include some of this information along with recipes, or are they mainly just the recipes?
Yes, I have a full ingredient encyclopedia that gives you suggestions. First of all, if you're not sure what something is, and then substitution suggestions if you don't have that or need to make your own. I try to walk you through it, and there's also like troubleshooting. If you're having an issue, something doesn't come out right, I give you suggestions what you might want to take a look at or adjust. But again, if you're looking at the cookbook and you need help, reach out to me. I am here. I really do want to help. If you see something on my blog you're not sure about, leave me a comment. Let me know.
Okay. Next, all right, so a thank you, baking, let's see. Okay, so Colleen's asking, baking powder always has lots of additives and probably GMO cornstarch. Can I just use baking soda? Both baking powder and baking soda have sodium bicarbonate. Is there a difference in baking powder and baking soda? So you kind of answered this, but maybe there's a little more clarification.
Yeah, I touched on that briefly. Oh my God. Sorry, my dog almost jumped on me, full speed. So baking soda and baking powder are different, and you can't just substitute them one for one. You can make your own baking powder. I don't know the ratios, I'd have to Google that, but it's baking soda with cream of tartar added. Sorry, Luca's distracting me. You can also find organic baking powder, non-GMO baking powder. There are definitely options on the shelf. Look at Whole Foods, Berkeley Bowl, shop online. I don't know brands offhand, but they make it really easy. You can get aluminum-free baking powder, specifically says so, if that's a concern.
Okay. Phoebe's asking, are there any substitutes for yeast for making bread? So what kind of bread are you looking at making, Phoebe? So there's the quick breads, like the banana breads and some of those, sorry about that. But what are you thinking about? Because I don't know that you can substitute yeast if you're trying to make a yeast bread, a loaf.
No, I'm afraid yeast is yeast. Unless you're doing a sourdough, you got to start with yeast.
Okay, so Vix said, look at naturally leavened recipes for yeast-free breads that are risen.
Okay.
Okay.
I can't really speak much to that. I do have to say, I don't remember where I first found the recipe, but there's such a thing as English muffin bread. Google that. And that's a fairly, I mean, it does have a different texture than like your standard sandwich loaf, but it's a great all-purpose kind of loaf bread made with baking powder.
Okay, so that was English muffin bread. Okay, that's a
really
great one. Okay, English muffin bread. And we have, let's see. So Vic is asking, are you having trouble finding flour right now? Any good online sources for flour? Looking for organic whole wheat pastry flour and white whole wheat flour.
Okay, so I was having issues finding flour, and it's so hit and miss. I order from Instacart primarily at this point. It's like the luck of the draw if they have it, if they don't. I've gotten the best results, I would say, shopping Berkeley Bowl, as long as you can get a delivery slot. They're well stocked, and they have more natural Whole Foods alternatives.
Okay, so in the Bay Area for that. And can you talk about white whole wheat flour? Like, what is white whole wheat flour for people who don't know?
Sure, I really love white whole wheat flour. I use it as often as possible because it bakes and tastes just like all-purpose flour, but it has the nutrition of whole wheat. So you get much more fiber in that.
So is it a different type of wheat? Like what makes it, how is it different than a whole wheat flour?
Yes, it's a different type of wheat berry.
Okay. Because you can't, how do you go about, if you're looking at a recipe and you want to use some whole wheat flour, as if you don't have access to whole wheat white or white whole wheat, you can't just substitute easily 100% of the all-purpose flour for 100% wheat flour and expect the same result, right?
Oh no, I wouldn't do that. Bear in mind that you would get a denser result no matter what, but you could go up as high as probably half and half if you wanted, half whole wheat flour, half all-purpose.
What are your thoughts about whole wheat pastry flour?
I used to use it a lot more, but I just find it a bit limited. Um, it's still a bit heavier than like all-purpose flour, and it has a lot more of the whole wheat flavor, which I don't necessarily want in like a cookie or a cake. So I don't see as much use for it these days.
And it seems like the white whole wheat has just, it doesn't seem like it was available in the past as
Yeah,
it
it's
is now.
pretty recent. And again, King Arthur flour is my favorite. If you can get it, it's been impossible. I haven't been able to get that one recently. Hopefully they'll restock their online store.
Okay. What other questions? We're out of questions on our chat. Oh no, we have another. Do you cook with gluten-free flour, and what is your go-to flour, or do you do flour combinations?
I don't cook very much with gluten-free just because it's not a concern for me personally, but I do bake a lot for gluten-free friends. My favorite blend is from Bob's Red Mill. I think it's the 1-to-1. I don't remember exactly what they call it, but Bob's Red Mill does the best blend, in my opinion.
Okay, I've seen some combinations that have so many different ingredients, you know, to make a gluten-free flour blend with tapioca, and they've got all different types of flours together. Do you have any, what are your thoughts about coconut flour and almond flour? I'm seeing a lot more of those.
Okay, personally, I just don't like coconut flour. I don't love the flavor. It absorbs liquid very, very quickly, so you end up with more dry baked goods more often. Almond flour, I'm a big fan of, but you can't use that just one for one, replacing all-purpose flour, because it's gonna get crumbly and fall apart. If you want to substitute it, I would definitely add a starch or a gum. I do also, I know I have a blend in my book. I would have to look it up. I give a suggestion in the ingredients. I'm looking through right now.
Okay. Where do you see the use of the almond flour? Like why would you go, because it is expensive, you know,
Yeah.
so, and I've seen it lately a lot. And so I've seen some recipes with it, but in a lot of cases, I think they are trying to avoid gluten. So there are gluten-free recipe, but if gluten's not an issue, do you see a benefit of using an almond flour in any circumstances?
Oh, sure, I do that. And I think it just has great flavor. It's, nutty, and it also has a little bit more texture. So it just adds some more interest to your baked goods.
Okay, so would you think about it more like in a sweet bread, like a sweet quick bread?
Sure, sure.
Okay. All right, any other questions? I don't see any more on the chat. This is your chance. How do you make banana bread moist?
Okay, so moist baked goods, definitely double up on the bananas. I hate banana bread recipes that call for 2 bananas, honestly. It's like, that's not banana bread. But I hate to say it, usually the fat makes a baked good more moist, so more oil. But if you're trying to avoid oil, I would definitely recommend replacing any plain non-dairy milk with coconut milk, because it's a bit richer. You could also add some mashed avocado instead of some of the banana, because that's, got those healthy fats to it.
I saw a recipe, a friend of mine took a cornbread recipe and used avocado in it for the fat, and then she added, because of the little green, she added cilantro, which obviously
Smart. Cover it up a little bit.
Yeah, you can do that easily. Another question, this is not a food question, it's how did your career develop?
Oh man, that's a weird long story. Let's see, the abridged version. I basically started what at the time was a craft blog. I did knitting, crochet, sewing, and I just needed a place to share all these things. Eventually, I started cooking and baking more because I was a very new vegan at that point, not confident, and the best thing I could do was like a grilled cheese sandwich in the stupid little panini maker with those waxy cheese slices. So I got tired of that pretty quickly and started playing around, and eventually started making my own recipes because I hate following them. And I found great community online and was lucky enough to meet a publisher. And she offered me the opportunity to create my first cookbook. And that's where it all began. And I just got more and more into it from there. And I couldn't stop writing cookbooks, and I got more into photography. It varies these days if I consider myself a cookbook author or a food photographer. So I wear many hats. Thank you.
Yes, your photography is amazing. You have to visit her Bittersweet blog. It's excellent.
Thank
We
you.
have another question here. It says Sacramento Natural Foods Co-op bulk section has pre-packaged organic flour. Wide variety, but not everything is always in stock. Order online organic flour from community mills. They are local and ship. Faria Bakery sells sourdough starter polish and organic sourdough pizza in Oak Park, Sacramento. Order online. Oh, this is just giving us ideas. They sell bulk
It's a great
organic
resource.
bread flour. Yeah,
I
some
would also
vegan
suggest,
pastry.
for anyone who wants to get into sourdough, I've seen a lot of postings on Nextdoor. So reach out to your neighbors and ask, are you making sourdough? Can you spare some extra? And a lot of times they'll just give you some toss off for free.
So with sourdough, is there anything that you would, I know you said that you haven't mastered it, but what would you recommend flour-wise? Is there anything special that you would recommend?
If you're getting started, definitely just go with all-purpose flour. It's the easiest to work with, most easily digestible for the yeast. Yeast is a simple single-cell creature. It wants white flour, white sugar. They're not complicated beasts, especially if you're just getting your footing. Don't go for the fancy flours. I don't know. I'm sure you can do gluten-free. I wouldn't try it if you don't really know what you're doing. Keep it simple.
Okay. It's actually almost, it's hard to find even whole wheat sourdough out there that it's commercially produced.
Yeah, it's just a bit leaden, I'm afraid.
And then we have, let's see, I thought someone asked something else. What is next for you, your goals? Wow, okay.
That's a wide open question, man. I just want the same, but more. I want to make more cookbooks. I want to feed more people. I want to, reach more people. I want people to be able to feed themselves. I make recipes because I can't be everywhere and I can't make everyone's dinner. I can't make everyone's dessert. So I really want to teach people. I would love to be able to do classes in person, virtually. I'm not sure. I'm willing to try anything.
Yeah. Now, do you have seemed to settle with your cookbooks on sweet stuff?
More or less. I'm trying to explore more with savory. I do have one that's savory, that's real food really fast. The next one that I'm working on right now is also savory. We'll see if that gets out there. The next one actually coming down the pipeline, number 7, is ice cream. So I'm talking number 8. I'm trying to get back into more savory foods. So fingers crossed.
Yes. Do you have any ice cream recipes on your blog right now?
Oh yeah, and I already have an ice cream cookbook. This would be my second.
Oh wow. Okay. See, I need to go buy more books.
Yeah, it's endless.
It is endless. Oh my gosh. And people who know me know I have that disease of the cookbook buying-itis.
Yeah, so the one that's already out there is Vegan a la Mode. The one that is coming out next year, actually May 18th, 2021, mark your calendar. That's going to be called Super Vegan Scoops.
I saw that a la mode, but I don't have it. Okay, so Super Vegan Scoops. That sounds great too. My kids will be happy.
Yeah, not even ready for pre-order yet. It's been a long time coming. We had a lot of delays with, the pandemic, throwing a wrench in things, but it'll be worth the wait, I promise.
Definitely. Another question, how do you make healthy pizza dough? I've seen people use cauliflower crumble. That's from Phoebe.
Okay, I have no experience making cauliflower crust. To me, I'm sorry, not pizza. I'm kind of a pizza snob. I grew up around New York. I'd make pizza with my family as a kid. It's got to be thin crust. I, it's pretty simple, just a basic dough, all-purpose flour or white whole wheat flour, a yeast. You could use basically the same formula as like a bread dough and just roll it out really thin.
Do you recommend cooking it on a pizza stone, or do you would you let it rise do you pre-cook the crust and then add the toppings, or is that all based on preference?
It is a lot of preference. To me, certainly you get the best dark brown blistered bottom crust if you use a pizza stone. The key though is to have your oven really, really hot, like so hot that it makes you scared. 500 or hotter if it can go that high, because it needs to take only a little bit of time, go super fast because you want really, really thin. So temperature, time, and thickness is the key here.
Thank you for that specific advice. We have one question. What are your top 3 favorite recipes? How can you ask that? That's like asking what's your favorite kid. Okay,
I know.
Ken, we'll ask.
I really couldn't just pick that out of thin air. I don't know. I'm sorry. I gotta disappoint you.
What did you eat over the weekend? One recipe you ate in the past week that you thought was really great?
Well, it was super simple, homey, ugly, but just the other day I made a meatless chicken and dumpling soup. It was really comforting and reminded me of home, so I like that.
Okay. Another question. What role does salt play in baking?
Salt is essential in baking and cooking in life. It's all about flavor. It doesn't create flavor, but it accentuates flavor. So it makes things taste more like themselves, if that makes any sense. You never want to take the salt out of a recipe. It's going to be super bland.
So I know that Kathy's husband is in congestive heart failure. Doesn't he have CHF? I think so. And so she's having to be really, really, really careful with salt. So I think she's wondering too, does it make recipes flop? Like, there's one thing about flavor being bland, but could it make a baking recipe flop if you didn't have the salt in it?
It shouldn't. Structurally, it should still be the same. It just might taste a little bit flat.
Flat, okay.
Kimmery, your recipe for cheesy sauce, I tried it once with no salt. It was awful. But then I cut the salt in half and that worked.
Yeah,
okay.
And there's certainly lower sodium alternatives. Yeah. You can reduce salt if it's concerned, but personally, I can't lie, I love salt.
Okay. But with the baking, that's good to know, as far as it's not necessarily a chemical reaction or a structure that it would provide. Okay. Any last questions? We have enjoyed this time so very much. We had, this was just,
I hope I could help a little bit.
Oh my gosh. Yes, definitely. Definitely. Email again is Hannah at
mysweetvegan.com. All one word.
Hannah at mysweetvegan.com.
Yes, and we check my blog, bittersweetblog.com. So many recipes there for you, stories, all sorts of craziness. 15
years of posting, so we appreciate that so much.
Yeah.
We know how much work it is. I know how much work it is to try to maintain a website, and oh my goodness.
Yeah, 3 posts
we appreciate
regularly.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Thank you so much. So we will we'll put this on our YouTube, and I really, really appreciate your participation today, everybody. But Hannah, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. This was fun.
Yay, and we got a little bit of your outside, and we got to meet your dog, Luca.
Yeah, I think he's gone back to bed. He's had enough of me.
So cute. Well, enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much.
You too. Thank you. And take care.
Take care. Goodbye, everybody.